Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you guys so much for joining me. In today's video, it's Wednesday, so I have wide receivers coming at you. I also am dropping tight ends and defenses. And don't forget, on Tuesdays, I always do quarterback kickers as well as running backs to give you the full slate of information that you need to dominate your opponents as we push for that chip. In today's video, I am going over the top 30 options at the wide receiver position. I'm also going to cover a couple of notable omissions and why I chose to leave them out of my rankings, at least for now. I also update all of my tiers on Fridays with my start sit tiers video, so keep an eye out for that as well. It'll bring you the most up-to-date information that you need. And with that done, if you are new to the channel, please consider liking and subscribing. The support means so much. It helps me out a ton. It enables me to do what I love so I can keep bringing you guys the content that you love. If you have any start or sit questions, please drop them down below. Do not hesitate to reach out to me on Sleeper as well. I will be checking in early and often. I want to be able to help you out as much as I can. Now let's get into Week 16's wide receiver rankings. Who else could it be at the top spot? Number one, it is Cooper Kupp. He travels to Minnesota to take on the Vikings. For the first time all season, Kupp made it 3 straight top 5 finishes with an epic performance against Seattle. He scored twice to go along with 136 yards. He now has 388 yards and 4 scores in his last 3 games, and Calvin Johnson's record is in sight for my little Cooper Kupp. Davante Adams is in at 2. He has a home matchup against Cleveland, and Adams was able to make it back-to-back games with a score for the first time all year. He now has 5 of them to go along with 384 yards in his last 4 games. The Browns, however, are top 10 in passing touchdowns allowed and points per game to the position in their last 3, but neither Rodgers or Adams mind a challenge. Moving on to 3 at home against Pittsburgh, it is Tyreek Hill. And I sorta predicted an explosion for Hill last week, and he delivered, racking up 148 yards and a score and finishing as the wide receiver 2 overall. Pittsburgh has no chance of matching up with him, and I wouldn't be surprised to see the connection with Mahomes take off to end the year. Traveling to Tennessee, and in at number 4, it is Deebo Samuel. And as requested last week, Deebo saw the most targets that he has since back in week 9, and he made it 5 straight games with a score en route to a top 10 finish. Tennessee allows the 2nd most points per game to the position as well, so it should be another monster day for Deebo. The last player in my top 5 is Deontay Johnson. He travels to Kansas City, and Johnson was unable to do much damage as the entire Steelers offense sputtered once more, and he miraculously led the team in receiving yards with just 38. It's going to be a completely different story against the Chiefs, and I expect double-digit targets for him once again and a big game from DJ. Kansas City allows the 10th most passing yards on the year as well, so that gives him a nice boost. With slight concern, I have Justin Jet Jefferson in at 6. He's getting a home matchup with the Rams. I am assuming that Jalen Ramsey shadows Jefferson, and I cannot wait to see what that matchup brings. It will not be easy for Jet, but I am betting that he has his share of big plays and continues his march towards history as one of the best young wide receivers in the NFL. My 7th ranked player is Keenan Allen. He travels to Houston to take on the Texans, and Allen returned from his absence to post yet another top 10 performance. He now has 3 touchdowns as well in his last 2 games. With the way that Justin Herbert is playing as of late, it is a near certainty that Allen makes it 3 straight games with a score. At home against the football team, in at 8, it is CeeDee Lamb. With 32 targets in his last 3, the opportunities have been there for Lamb with mixed results. He hasn't completely tanked, and though the football team has played better as of late, they did just allow nearly 300 yards through the air from Jalen Hurts, who had just 276 in his last 2 starts combined prior to Tuesday's game. In at 9, it is T. Higgins, who is at home against Baltimore. And last week was one to forget for Higgins, but if you survived his faceplant last week, you are rewarded with a smash matchup here against Baltimore. The Ravens are bottom 3 in yards per pass and touchdowns allowed to receivers over their last 3 games. We know that they're banged up, and Higgins is going to take full advantage of it. His teammate, Jamar Chase, the young stud, rounds out my top 10, and Chase was absolutely smothered against the Broncos, ending the game with a single catch for 3 yards. The matchup with Baltimore is going to be a welcome sight, and I think Burrow uses it to get Chase going once again. They need each other for the stretch run, and it starts here. Moving on to 11 and traveling to Foxborough to take on the Patriots, it is Stefon Diggs. The touchdown saved the day for owners against Carolina, and Diggs will be looking for revenge after a tough wide receiver 39 finish against the Patriots in week 13. The weather conditions will certainly be better, but he'll still have to be contending with JC Jackson, so he's going to earn everything he gets against the Patriots. My last wide receiver 1 in week 16, it is Tyler Lockett in a home matchup against Chicago. Now Lockett should be good to go after a week off, and the Bears are bottom 11 in both points per game to the position and yards per pass attempt. He will make it 3 straight wide receiver 1 finishes against Chicago. Traveling to New Orleans to take on the Saints, Jalen Waddle finds himself at 13. And Tua is going to be absolutely ecstatic to have his main guy back. Waddle will be relied upon heavily in this one. The Saints allow the 8th most points per game to wide receivers at nearly 37 a game, so I expect another big game for Waddle, who's been on fire in his last 3. At 14, it is Antonio Brown who travels to Carolina, and the only good news that the Bucs received all week was the likely return of Antonio Brown from injury and suspension. With Chris Godwin done for the year, Mike Evans probably out for at least this week, Brown is going to soak up a ton of targets and has legit top 5 wide receiver upside against the Panthers. Adam hooked on a Thielen is in at 15. He has a home matchup against the Rams. And if Thielen was truly close to returning on Monday night against Chicago, it just makes sense that he would be able to go a week later against LA. Minnesota's defense is not going to be able to stop the Rams, so Minnesota is going to have to air it out often to keep up. Next up at 16, it is Hunter Renfrow with a home matchup against Denver. And for just the second time since week 6, Renfrow saw less than 8 targets, and he couldn't get much going against Cleveland with just 32 yards on his way to a wide receiver 52 finish. We cannot let one game destroy our confidence in him fully, but the matchup with Denver certainly does not help. The Broncos are top 10 in touchdowns, points per game, and yards per pass attempt to receivers on the year. We need to temper expectations and hope that he can get that volume back. Brandon Cooks is my 17th ranked player. He's got a home matchup with the Chargers. Cooks put up a monster performance against Jacksonville, scoring twice while breaking the century mark for the 2nd straight game. The targets have come back with 21 in his last 2 after a bizarre 3-game stint with a total of just 14. The Chargers are top 4 in the NFL in points per game to pass catchers though, and they allow just under 29 points a game. He is the only show in town, so I think he keeps that hot streak going. Moving on to 18 and traveling to Arizona to take on the Cardinals, it is Michael Pittman Jr. Last week against New England was a horrific one for Pittman. He caught just 1 ball on that opening possession before being ejected in the 3rd quarter. Arizona is bottom 5 in passing touchdowns and yards allowed per pass in the last 3 weeks, so this matchup is just what he needs to get right. Across the field in the same game, I have Christian Kirk at 19, and the Cardinals are unlikely to find a whole lot of success on the ground after what the Colts just did to the Patriots, so it makes Kirk an excellent start as the number 1 receiver in this passing attack. He turned 12 targets into 9 catches for 94 yards and a score last week, and I think the encore is on its way. Rounding out my top 20, traveling to Houston, it is Mike Williams. Prior to Thursday's game against Kansas City, every 9+ target game Williams had came with a minimum of a top 16 finish. Go figure. The Chargers are going to come out angry after fading late to the Chiefs, and I think Williams is heavily involved in a blowout of Houston. Just waiting for him to be good enough to get inside of my rankings. It is Amon-Ra St. Brown at 21. And in scoring in 2 out of his last 3, St. Brown has come alive out of nowhere for owners with 249 yards in that span. He is clearly the guy with TJ Hawkinson out for the season, and the Falcons allow the 4th most points per game to the position. He could smash this ranking and has a ton of upside. In a home matchup against Detroit, in at 22, I have Russell Gage, and it has now been 3 out of the last 4 games for Gage, finishing as a wide receiver 1, as his overall wide receiver 6 finish against San Francisco was his best game of the year. Detroit is a decent matchup, and Gage is averaging almost 10 targets a game in his last 3. We buy that volume against the Lions. Sneaking into my wide receiver 2 rankings, at 23, I have Terry McLaurin. He travels to Dallas to take on the Cowboys. McLaurin saved owners with a 46-yard bomb early in the game against Philly, but finished with just 2 catches for 51 yards in a difficult matchup. It won't be quite as tough this week, but Scary Terry goosed 2 weeks ago against this Cowboys team while leaving early with a concussion. I believe he rebounds some this time around, but know the risks if you are playing him. At 24, DJ Moore finds his spot against Tampa Bay. Now, the Bucs allow the 4th fewest yards per pass in the NFL, but Moore has 3 finishes in the top 22 in the last 4 weeks. He's seen 38 targets in that time and will continue to be fed as the only real threat in Carolina's passing attack. His upside has been capped for a while, but his floor is solid. Van Jefferson is the last player in my top 25. He travels to Minnesota to take on the Vikings. He has now scored in 3 out of his last 4 games, and Jefferson continues to produce solid numbers, and now he gets the Vikings, who have allowed 7 scores over their past 3 games. I really hope you bought him low, as I suggested in my Week 11 video. Down at 26, I have Marquise Brown. He travels to Cincinnati to take on the Bengals. And the 14 targets that Brown received last week tied his season high, but the 43 yards that accompanied it were clearly not what owners were hoping for. We are not worried about this matchup, and Brown should get Lamar back this week. So we hope for the upside that we haven't seen since back in Week 9, and we expect a flex-worthy performance. Odell Beckham Jr. is my 27th ranked player. He's got that road matchup with the Vikings. And prior to the dud against Seattle, Beckham was onto something in this offense, and he still has 2 wide receiver 1 finishes in the last 4. Minnesota will be helpless stopping the Rams' passing attack, so I love his upside. At 28, it's Darnell Mooney traveling to Seattle, and it could have been a huge day for Mooney, who was inches from scoring on Monday night. He caught a ball in the back of the end zone, but only got 1 foot in, allegedly, and later, Justin Fields missed him on a 2nd touchdown opportunity. The Hawks are top 10 in points per game versus wideouts, which causes me to leave him near the bottom of my rankings. Tumbling down a bit, at 29, I have Amari Cooper in a home matchup against Washington. Now, the bust was real last week for owners, but this matchup 2 weeks ago gave Cooper his best finish in the last 8 weeks. That gives me enough confidence to place Cooper into flex consideration, but the risk here is obvious. His floor is nothing, but he can also help carry you if he hits. Brandon Ayuk gets my last spot at number 30. He travels to Tennessee to take on the Titans. And after seeing just 2 targets against the Falcons, it is hard to trust Ayuk if you're pushing for a title shot. The matchup here is solid, and there is a chance that Tennessee's front causes a lot of throws for Jimmy Garoppolo. Ayuk had 10 targets back in week 14, so we hope for a happy medium in this one. Into my notable omissions, and I have a handful once again for you guys this week. It starts with DK Metcalf. He has a home matchup against the Bears. There is just too much risk in continuing to put Metcalf in your lineups. He can certainly explode on any week, and Chicago is definitely a team to do it against, but he hasn't topped 60 yards since week 7. I am hoping for more production with it all on the line, so I pass on Metcalf. Devontae Parker is another guy I am avoiding. He travels to New Orleans. He was a late addition to my rankings on Friday last week, and he turned in a top 12 finish in an excellent matchup. But he is likely the guy that Marshawn Lattimore pays the most attention to, and as Jalen Waddle is lined up all over the field, it makes me pass on Parker. Staying out of my rankings, at least for now, it is AJ Green against Indianapolis. Now, I actually do not mind Green this week, and with 18 targets in his last 2 games, he may end up in my rankings on Friday. But right now, I simply like other options more. The other is AJ Brown in a home matchup with San Francisco, and there is a distinct possibility that Brown is able to return this week, but until there is more news about this situation, I'm going to keep him out of my rankings. Check back in on Friday. And that will wrap it up for Week 16's wide receiver rankings. Thank you for spending some time with me today for it. If you guys have any start or sit questions, drop them down below. Reach out to me on Sleeper, whatever works for you. I want to be able to help you out. If you are new to the channel, if you enjoyed the content today, or if you just haven't got to it yet, please like and subscribe. The support means everything to me. It helps me out so much in my journey to get my first 100 subscribers. This is Relentless Press. I'm your host, Abraham Opatz, and we'll see you next time.